known physics would say you've got to have a tube that's pretty hot to just pass 7.5 litres of air through that to warm it up from 2 degrees to 36.9.
So how hot does it have to be in order to be able to heat it that much, to heat the air that much?
Let's say it has to be hotter than 36.9
Well, that's
degrees.
obvious,
Yes, but there's nothing between here and here,
the nose and the
which
lungs,
is hotter than 36.9.
No, that's true. Yeah, it doesn't make sense when you think about it.
Yeah, there's no superheated element there.
No.
And if this chemical burn is happening in the UCP1 within the brown adipose tissue, there's a problem there in that pigs are warm-blooded, but pigs don't have the brown adipose tissue. Birds are warm-blooded, but birds don't have brown adipose tissue.
Welcome to Mind the Shift. My name is Anders Bolling. Today we will discuss something that might seem like a fringe topic, but if that's the case, you might say that everybody who's walking around on this earth with a body is a fringe topic, because we're going to talk about body heat. One might think that everything has been said in science about that particular subject, but it turns out, no, it hasn't. I know that my guest today has also other bold and unconventional ideas aside from body heat. So we will hopefully have time to touch on those also. Welcome, Paul Scanlan.
Anders, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Thanks for making time to speak with me today.
It's my pleasure. That. And you're joining us from London, right?
That's right. I grew up in Australia.
Yeah.
But for about the last 20 years, I've been living in London, and there are good things about both countries, so I miss Australia a bit, but it's great to be living in the UK.
Yeah. A lot of Australians live in England, I guess. So you're not the only one.
Yeah, it's almost a rite of passage. A lot of them do go home though.
Yeah.
For example, my parents came to live in the UK just for a bit and so I happened to be born in the UK. They went back to Australia. I grew up there. But it just means that I was able to come back to the UK quite easily. And next thing you know, you blink and 2 decades have passed. And
yeah, I know.
Yes.
Well, your accent isn't that very Australian, actually. I would say it sounds more British, but maybe it's not an expert.
I've always been fairly softly spoken, I think. And so people even accuse me of being a Kiwi at some stage, a New Zealander. No offense to Kiwis or to Australians, but maybe if I've had a bit to drink or something like that, or I've been watching a lot of Australian TV, I might lapse. If there are any key words that go over the top of your head, just let me know and I'll try and put them back into proper English.
Okay. Wonderful. So, Paul, I've just read your brief but immensely interesting and funny book, which is called
Funny in parts, and
yes,
the humor will appeal to different people.
That's true.
Very
particular kind of humor, but it's a lot of play on words and things like that.
I think if you're reading a book about body heat and worried about the humor, you're not really reading the right book. If you're looking for high grade champagne quality humor, then try something else. But yes, I tried to introduce a bit of levity to keep people away.
And you managed to do that, I think. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, people who are very into them, very serious people might not appreciate all the humor that you display in here. But anyway, it looks like this for the YouTube audience: the Body Heat Fiasco, solving a mystery in science. And it's it challenges the standard model of how body heat is generated. To spoil the thrill, it is the squeezing of air in the lungs that does the trick.
Exactly, throughout the respiratory system.
A few listeners might maybe
might beg to differ.
Their jaws when they heard that, but stay calm because Paul will explain everything. When I read this book, I thought that either this man is completely out to lunch in this matter, or he's a genius, because it's a little bit difficult to think that it's something in between there. Don't you think yourself?
I really appreciate you saying that, and for humoring me. If in the fullness of time it turns out that anyway, I wouldn't be putting it out there if I didn't have full confidence in it. But I take the point that it's quite at odds with what the mainstream view is at the moment, and for good reason. People want to know that if something's quite different, why should we believe that? Why shouldn't we just fall back to what professors and teachers and textbooks have been telling us for more than 100 years?
Yeah.
But
we'll of course delve into the details of your theory, or what you've found, and also what the standard model is. But so it is controversial. I mean, I'm a layman here, so to me it makes a lot of sense what you're saying there. But on the other hand, I don't know anything about the standard textbook model of body heat. Anyway, so, but what is it? Why did you write this book, and where does this interest from the mechanics, the physics of the body come from? So, in short, who are you? How did all this begin?
Good question. I studied science at university, and I've always been interested in science, different aspects of it. For example, as a child growing up, I caught lots of lizards and frogs, and was really into getting out and about in nature and trying to understand more about reptiles and amphibians. Other interest in physiology came from being a distance runner and also going to the gym. Hard to believe, but I used to go to the gym quite heavily and really appreciated doing that. But particularly having studied science at school and at university, I was always grounded very much in the sort of Western science, Western medicine. This is the way it is. It's in the textbooks. There are specific laws involved here. People smarter than me have sorted these things out. So read the textbook. That's the way it is. But when I started to find that life was perhaps at odds with what's in the textbook, that's when I started to open my mind and to investigate and explore, and that came up for me first in relation to my eyes and my vision. So that was a sort of gateway into trying to understand more and taking a wider view and looking at what's in the fringes, because I think all progress is likely to be made at the fringes, and you can't adopt everything that's fringe, but there's no harm in considering it.
Well, I agree on that, of course. So vision was your first interest when it comes to the body.
Exactly. I was a couple of years after school. A good friend of mine said to me, "Scan," my nickname, said, "Scan, you were the squarest guy in school." And that was news to me. I knew I was hardworking and I'd done well. And what was worse was there was a girl that we knew from school also with us on that occasion. She said, "Yeah, that's right." It's just like, oh no, I didn't believe So I worked really hard at school, and you'd expect the guy who's working really hard to be the one who ends up with glasses and sort of really bookish. But I was physically active as well, and played some Australian rules football and was into cross-country running. And everything was going fine until in year 12, my eyesight started going south. I needed to sit in the front row in the chemistry class, and I was peering and looking, and eventually ended up at an optometrist's office, and he tested my eyes, and the news was, yes, you're short-sighted. You're going to need to wear these glasses. And so for the next 10 years, I wore glasses and contact lenses. And during that time, I moved from Canberra to Sydney. So I was in a new city. I didn't know too many people there. And I was living opposite the library. And I happened to read a short part of a book called Posture Makes Perfect. It was a book written by a Kiwi GP, a New Zealand GP, who was just trying to hammer home the message that posture is important. And he spent about a couple of paragraphs just saying, by the way, the eyesight that he has is great because he looks out the window into the distance, and here are 2 or 3 eye exercises. So I thought, wow, maybe my eyesight's going south and getting worse. Maybe I could try doing eye exercises, because I was going to the gym at the time and being very physically fit and active, and everything was going well except for my eyes. So what I did was I started looking around on the internet, which was fairly new in those days, for some more information, and also to buy an eye exercise kit.
What is that?
Well, at the time there were two groups in America that were selling eye exercise kits, and I thought, which one should I go with? Which would there was I think a video and a book, and it was all about learn about eye exercises, do this, improve your vision, which sounded like a good idea to me, but it was quite contrary to what optometrists and visual professionals would say. They'd say, no, you can't make any improvement. But I knew just from having done a couple of exercises, having read those few paragraphs in the book, Posture Makes Perfect, I knew, hang on, my vision is getting slightly better. I can tell. So I knew that there was a difference or a delta between what the mainstream view was and what I could actually achieve. So why not try and see how well I could go with my eye exercises?
Yeah.
Thought about it for a while, went back to the internet and couldn't decide which of the eye exercises to go for. When I went back to the internet, one of them had been shut down. So that made the choice for me. I ordered the eye exercise kit. It arrived at work, which was quite good, just before a holiday. Anyway, I spent some time doing these eye exercises.
Okay. And what happened?
Well, I called my optometrist back in Canberra, and he was very good with me. I said, look, I'm about to start some eye exercises, and I expected him to maybe not be very appreciative of that. But what he said was, he put me in contact with someone in Sydney. He said, this chap might be interested. So I actually had an optometrist there who was not only an optometrist, but also teaching at the university. He said, sure, I'll test your eyes. Come in every so often. So we watched as the prescription required to see 20/20 for me improved from -3 or -3.25. I improved it gradually, so I could see 20/20 with -2. So I'd improved, depending on how you measure it, by about a third. And so I started to plateau at that stage, and I was able to. I then moved to the UK, and I was able to keep doing eye exercises, but also explore some other things, because eye exercises are more like there are muscles in your eyes and around your eyes, and varying views about the extent to which they affect your vision. The dominant view is, yes, you've got muscles on the outside, and all they do is help swivel the eye from side to side and up and down. And the only muscle to do with clear vision is this tiny little one inside the eye, which affects how tight or loose the lens is. So it changes the shape of the lens.
Yeah.
That's the only one that's important for clarity of vision, and you cannot control that. So don't even think about eye exercises. But I knew there was more to it than that.
I think there's a commonality between this and Body Heat, because as far as I understand, we chatted a few weeks ago, first time, and got to know each other. And you mentioned that pressure has something to do with it, which it has with Body Heat as well, which is interesting.
Exactly. So I went to by this stage I'd moved to the UK. I was working in a new job in a new city, so I could walk around without being able to see particularly well, without worrying about upsetting friends and people I knew. I could sort of walk around and concentrate on my eyes and improving my eyes most of my waking hours. And I gradually came to understand the importance of that breathing is very important. that first came to me. I first started reading a lot about vision, about breathing, in connection with hay fever, because my hay fever was starting to get worse. And there's what's called Buteyko breathing, which has to do with a Russian professor who was studying to become a doctor, and he walked into the waiting room and he looked around at everyone and he said, "Oh, well, you've obviously got a breathing issue. Oh, you've got a breathing issue." And he noticed that everyone seemed to not to be breathing as well as they could. And my perspective is that breathing is always the bridesmaid and never the bride. It's always the case of, breathing, okay, there are lots of symptoms of this thing, and one of them is breathing, as opposed to breathing being the main game. And when that's not right, a myriad of other things flow from that.
Okay, yeah.
So with Buteyko, that's just all about slowing your breathing down, and hey presto, a lot of these things resolve.
Yeah.
And if you look back in history, it's always been a case of slow, deep breathing is what is prescribed by people who do, say, yoga and Tai Chi. These practices going back thousands of years.
Yeah, ancient traditions all speak about breathing, more or less. I mean, it's mentioned in
the Christian tradition, in Judaism, everywhere.
Posture and breathing.
Exactly. So if it was all just about oxygen, then you'd think breathing rapidly in and out, in and out, in and out would be great to maximize the oxygen. But unfortunately, schoolboy understanding is oxygen good, carbon dioxide bad. But in actual fact, oxygen's important and carbon dioxide is important.
Yeah.
So if you breathe out all your carbon dioxide, then you have just as much trouble as if you have breathed out all your oxygen effectively.
Interesting.
There's something called the Bohr effect, which sounds like what I might be having now on you and your audience. BOHR, as in Niels Bohr.
Okay.
And one way of looking at that is, in the body, there's the hemoglobin molecule, and most of the oxygen that's carried around your body is attached to the hemoglobin molecule. And that's sticky, and the red blood cells sort of carry that to the lungs, and there the oxygen attaches to the hemoglobin molecule, and it's stuck to the hemoglobin molecule, and it travels around the body in the bloodstream. And then just say you've used your hand like that, you used your muscles, and you've got some sort of carbon dioxide byproducts there. The hemoglobin molecule transports the oxygen from your lungs, attached to the hemoglobin molecule, gets to where the work's been done, and in the presence of the carbon dioxide, the oxygen detaches, and the carbon dioxide sticks to the hemoglobin and is carried to the lungs, where the carbon dioxide detaches and more oxygen can attach. The problem arises because if you breathe out all of your carbon dioxide, then the oxygen will stick to the hemoglobin molecule, but it won't detach. It won't come unstuck. So you can have all the oxygen in the world that you want, but if you've breathed out all your carbon dioxide, the oxygen will just stay stuck to the hemoglobin molecule. But everyone is of the opinion that, oxygen, more oxygen, more oxygen, more oxygen. But slow, deep breathing, where you control the level of carbon dioxide, you don't have too much, you don't have too little. That's the key to things working the way they should.
Yeah, it seems that so many good things come from breathing properly and correctly and calmly. So I think we can get back to this thing about your vision at the end, towards the end here, because we're going to talk a little bit about your other projects. But this is all very fascinating. But let's go back to the book here, Body Heat Fiasco, because eventually you, as we understand here, continued to the topic of how body heat is generated, and you quickly understood that textbook model, the standard model, is flawed in many ways. And so, can you just explain to the audience here what does the mainstream say is the explanation for us having body heat, and what do you propose instead? What are your objections to this? I think the standard model has to do with chemical processes, whereas you are focusing on the physics of the body in this matter. So, what is BAT and UCP1? Those are two crucial things in this matter.
That's a great question you've put there.
The whole shebang.
Let's start with the standard model, which could be summarized in a question: how do humans generate body heat? The standard answer is you go to the supermarket, you buy food, there's food energy in the food. You eat that food, and inside the body there are chemical processes which give off heat. That's UCP1, which is uncoupling protein 1. There's a proton going down a mitochondrial gradient which gives off heat, and that supposedly occurs in this particular tissue, BAT, or brown adipose tissue.
Brown fat, you might say.
Brown, which is the same as brown fat, exactly. That is brown fat. So this UCP1 gives off heat within brown fat. There's a secondary source of heat, apparently, according to the mainstream view, which is when your muscles move, some of the energy is given off as motion, but some of it's also given off as heat. So moving muscles generates heat. Getting back to this mainstream explanation, you've gone to the supermarket, you've eaten food, there's a chemical burn in your cells which gives off heat, and then that warms the body, and then you might breathe in air. Say, for instance, it's snowing in Sweden at the moment, or was overnight. Yes. You might breathe in air, and it might be, say, 2 degrees when it goes in here, and by the time it's reached your lungs, it's heated up to 36.9. That is the standard view. You eat the food, there's a chemical burn, that warms the body, and then when you breathe in cold air, the warm body warms the air as it passes through these tubes. To focus on, say, two key problems with that. One is, if you've got a tube that's this long, and you've got air passing through it, and it needs to 7.5 litres per minute of air needs to come in at 2 degrees here, and by the time it's reached here, it's been increased to 36.9 degrees. Somehow, by just touching the sides of this tube, it's supposed to have warmed up there. Now, if you try, known physics would say you've got to have a tube that's pretty hot to just pass 7.5 litres of air through that to warm it up from 2 degrees to 36.9.
So how hot does it have to be in order to be able to heat it that much, to heat the air that much?
Let's say it has to be hotter than 36.9
Well, that's
degrees.
Obvious, yes.
Yes, but there's nothing between here and here,
the nose and the
which
lungs,
is hotter than 36.9.
No, that's true. Yeah, it doesn't make sense when you think about it.
Yeah, there's no superheated element there.
No.
And just so, and if this chemical burn is happening in the UCP1 within the brown adipose tissue, there's a problem there in that pigs are warm-blooded, but pigs don't have the brown adipose tissue. Birds are warm-blooded, but birds don't have brown adipose tissue or UCP1. And some fish and reptiles have UCP1.
Yeah, those are cold-blooded. So let's look at the difference between because we are speaking about warm-blooded creatures like mammals like ourselves, and also birds who are creating heat by the way that you are going to explain soon here. But the other types of creatures, the cold-blooded ones, they are dependent. I mean, their body heat is dependent on the outside temperature all the time, as far as I understand. So
exactly, they either gain their heat directly from sitting in the sun, so directly from the sun, or from their environment, like lying on a warm rock.
Yeah.
And the idea being that we're smart as mammals, we can operate the whole time, regardless of whether we have a hot rock or the sun is shining. We eat this food and we generate our heat. But the mainstream view being we generate the heat by a chemical process within the cells. By contrast, what the understanding that I'm bringing to the picture is that inside the body, there's a certain amount of tension. There are bones pushing this way. There are muscles pulling the opposite direction. And so the model being, you go to the supermarket and you buy the food. There's food energy in the food. The food energy powers those muscles to create that tension. So you've got a tension system that you then breathe air into. And there are spirals in your nose, the nasal concha or turbinates. You breathe air in through these spirals and you squeeze it in this tension system. And when you squeeze a gas, the temperature of that goes north. You squeeze the gas, that warms the air. And so the point I'm getting across is that you squeeze the gas to warm the gas, and the warm air warms the body, not the warm air, not the warm body warming the air.
Yeah, it's the other way around from the standard model. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you've been brought up on a textbook which talks about brown adipose tissue and maybe inefficient muscle contraction, you go down that pathway. There's no easy point at which you can put your hand up and say, "Oh, look, that doesn't seem to work." It normally wouldn't enter your mind, and if you did, you'd be maybe drummed out of your particular institution for suggesting that. So there are a lot of examples which suggest that yes, this has got to do with squeezing air, not with a chemical burn.
And that's compressing air raises the temperature of that gas. That's a well-known fact. I mean, that's not controversial at all.
No, and for example, in a diesel engine, instead of having a spark plug to generate the explosion, in a diesel engine, the piston just pushes the fuel mixture.
Yeah.
The heat increases, and that causes the ignition. That's a practical example of this adiabatic expansion, or adiabatic process, I should say. But then there are other examples in real life which we will discuss.
But this is the basic mechanism here. And this is, I mean, it's very straightforward, and it seems so much simpler than the chemical explanation. Talking about, I mean, Occam's razor, which is supposed to be a principle that you employ when you want to find the simplest. Well, it says basically that the simplest explanation to something is probably the correct explanation. So anyway, everybody can understand this, the physics of the body. I mean, just by thinking about it for a little while, whereas the chemical processes are very difficult to get a grasp on if you're not an expert.
And I appreciate why you said at the outset, it's like, hang on, this could be baloney, this could be crazy, but it doesn't seem that way. And at least having the conversation about it, you're brave enough to have the conversation and say, open the floor and have people comment to say, well, Paul, well, Anders, this doesn't work because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
Let's have that conversation.
Let's have it.
And explain why.
I invite people to contradict you if they can in a wise way, and that's also interesting. And it's, I mean, it would be good for you too, also to have this.
Exactly. I could concentrate on something else.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So I was wrong. Okay, let's go on.
Exactly. And I shouldn't be cancelled for that. No one should be cancelled for having an open mind and having different.
But I have to say that the book isn't. I mean, it's not baloney when you read it, because it's very. I mean, it's based in science, and as far as I can tell, I'm a layman, but I know enough science to understand that you are not. I mean, you're referring to a lot of scientists, and I know some of the references that you make there. So it tells me that you have been thinking about this a lot, and I
may look crazy and sound crazy, but I'm not wholly crazy.
No, you're not. No. So I had just a detailed question about the cold-blooded animals. Don't they? I mean, they breathe air too, don't they?
Yes.
So why don't they heat up their bodies by compressing that air into their lungs?
That's such a good question. And for example, all at a thermodynamic level, so most chemical reactions do tend to give off heat. And so if you have a chemical reaction happening, there's normally some heat given off at the same time. But we're looking at the distinction between the cold-blooded animals and the warm-blooded animals. And you're saying, hey, Paul, cold-blooded animals breathe too. I'm like, good point. There are certain distinctions. There's a certain difference between our respiratory system and theirs. A key one is that in birds and mammals, you have this turbine-like structure in your nose through which
spirals in the nose.
Exactly, and that's indicative of something that's to do with pressure and forcing something through and increasing the speed and changing the pressure. Reptiles and amphibians don't have those spirals, with one or two exceptions. There is a sea turtle, for example, that, I'll put it this way, the sea turtle apparently has a simple analog of the spirals of the more complex spirals that birds and mammals have. The sea turtle has the spirals in its nose. And just by coincidence, that is one of the exceptional reptiles which demonstrates elevated body heat.
Mm-hmm. Compelling.
Yeah, compelling. And sure, I'm fishing for evidence. Anyone who's anyone who's putting something forward will hope to find things that agree with it, with what they're putting forward. And I know in science, it's best practice is to sort of not look for that supporting evidence, just to try and disprove. And if I was able to disprove what I'm putting forward about body heat, then life would be a lot easier. But it's paradoxically, this is supposed to be a credibility builder because I have other things that I need to say.
Yeah. It's going to be super interesting to follow your coming work here. So among the most compelling pieces of evidence in your book are examples of humans who are able to keep their body heat in extremely cold conditions. And you discuss, for instance, Mr. Wim Hof, the so-called Iceman, who is known to many people. And many who know about him, they assume that his trick is to, in some way, focus energy. I mean, they don't know exactly how that works, but they're talking about his ability to focus energy, like, shamans or yogis or people like that. And scientists have gauged his body, as far as I understand, when he sits in ice water and things like that. But they haven't really come up with a sustainable explanation to what is happening here. And you say, as far as I understand, measure the air that he's breathing, right?
Yes, he's doing special things with his breathing. He's able to swim almost 60 meters underwater in ice. He can stay in ice cold baths for 2 hours. He can set world records doing these things. And there have been a number of studies on him trying to work out how's he doing it. Wim Hof has come from a yoga breathing sort of background. When he instructs people about how best to take these challenges, he talks about specific breathing patterns, how to breathe in a particular way. And if you're exposed to what I'm putting forward, which is, breathing is important for squeezing the air, then it seems fairly obvious. But if you're instead focused on, well, there's something happening at a cellular level, maybe it's got to do with oxygen or something like that, then you can go down the chemistry pathway and try and explain it. But there's no good explanation of why the chemistry should change. By contrast, if you assume certain postures and do certain breathing, then all of a sudden you're handling the air in your respiratory system in a different way. And that can change just by moving the air around and changing how you're moving it around. That changes the pressure, which has temperature effects.
So the whole explanation, in your view, to his ability to sit in ice for 2 hours is that he's forcing his breathing, or he's breathing in a particular way, or he's able to compress air more efficiently than others, or
he's breathing in a particular way, which means that he can compress the air very well. But to get to that point, he's been focusing on his alignment and meditation. And the classic for meditation is concentrate on your breath and on your breathing. And just with any mechanical process, if everything is nicely aligned, for example, there's a put down about hippies talking about having all the chakras in a row.
Yeah.
If everything's nicely in alignment, then the mechanism for squeezing and breathing air, because warming air is the defining feature of being alive, and it's how our bodies have evolved to sort of be quite good at doing that. And if we concentrate on that, and particularly and Wim has been able to achieve this through meditation and alignment with his yoga and his concentration on how he breathes, and also positive thinking can't hurt in terms of being upbeat and approaching things with an open mind and a can-do sort of attitude. That all helps with having a body that's going to squeeze the air very well and have the right tension, the right tensional integrity, you might say, to achieve the goal, which is maintaining the body temperature.
I just came up with another example that is very good in your book about the fact that cold-blooded, it is the breathing that generates heat in the body of warm-blooded creatures. Namely, that birds are warm-blooded, but as long as the little chickens or the chicks or whatever it's called are in the eggs, they can't breathe, of course, and then they are cold-blooded. There they are cold-blooded. But if it were the chemical thing, then they would, of course, be able to generate their own heat in the body within the egg, but they aren't. So they are very dependent on
exactly the parent bird
to warm it,
to keep the eggs warm. If it was a simple chemical process which was generating heat, then the parent birds wouldn't have to spend their time and energy sitting on eggs. They could leave them somewhere safe, and they could be somewhere else.
Because their hearts are ticking and everything is working.
All the other processes in their cells are
at least
working
very
over
close
time.
to hatching. It is like that.
Yes.
So that's a good example. Yeah. So well, this thing about Wim Hof is also very, very interesting, of course. And there's also
he's inspiring a lot of people to do great things. And one of those, how I was talking about the yoga and the alignment and the meditation helping the breathing. One way of helping your breathing and getting everything into good alignment and good working order throughout the body is you can work on the alignment and the meditation, or you can put a bit of overload on your body by getting into the cold bath. And then your body knows, hang on, these bones have to be aligned correctly. I have to work on my breathing. Your body instantaneously starts, I'm squeezing. And you get used to doing that, strengthening the system, and then you can handle a cold bath. And you can handle a cold bath, and everything's in better alignment. And that has so many spin-off benefits for the rest of your life. So a cold shower, a cold bath, if your hot water system goes off, don't be too worried about it. But
well, I should be living in the right part of the world then, because it's very cold in the winter here in Sweden. But I actually don't enjoy the cold that much. Well, I can enjoy if I have a lot of clothes. I enjoy taking a walk in the snow and all that. But I always felt I was born in the wrong climate. I would love to live in the tropics. But anyway, this yoga breathing that you're speaking about here, the Ujjayi,
the warrior breath.
The victorious breath or something. Breathing.
Yes.
Ujjayi breathing. I practiced it a little bit. I practiced yoga Ashtanga yoga just for half a year, many years ago. It was very interesting. And then nowadays I practice meditation practically every day. And it's similar because it involves this type of breathing. And I try to use this Ujjayi breathing when I meditate also, at least during part of the meditation. But my impression is that what happens is, or what you feel is not so much an additional heating of your body, but a softening of your body. There's a softening. There's a feeling of you're being soft and flexible, and all pain goes away and things like that. So it's not so much the heat, but as some kind of alignment or whatever.
Potentially, if you concentrate on your breathing, so you're more effortlessly getting the right temperature, then parts of your body, muscles which have been tense and tight, can ease off and relax.
Oh, okay.
And
the spin-off effect of effective breathing.
Exactly. And it's reminding me of, I've got a model here somewhere. I referred to tensional integrity, which is this concept that this structural concept with, I don't know if you can see that, but the
looks like a molecule or something, or a model of a molecule rather.
Exactly. And there's a complicated thing called tensional integrity, which just involves that the models of it generally involve a stick, which is a compression element, and then a tension element, which is a string. And our whole body is structured this way. The muscles and the ligaments hold everything in a tension, and the hard elements, the bones, don't actually touch each other. They're held apart. And inside this, you have air pushing out. If your posture and your breathing go down, then bones may start to push against each other, and then you get replacement knees and replacement hips. But in a young, healthy individual, the bones are actually pulled apart, which contrasts with the sort of standard model in medicine, which assumes that everything just sits on top of each other like a column, held down by gravity, as opposed to being pulled out. A simple example of that is if you think of a dinosaur's head on the end of a long neck. If it was all just about bones and muscles just sort of hanging on, the dinosaur would not be able to support its neck on the end of its head on the end of a neck all day. But by contrast, if there's all air throughout here and everything's sort of pushing out and structured, then it can support its head as much as it needs to. Perhaps I could give you.
Saying that there's air in the system, also in this bone structure.
The air helps inflate and distribute everything. I could give a different example. Imagine if you had a dumbbell in your hand and you tried to hold it out at arm's length. You couldn't do that for very long.
No.
But if you had one of those inflatable sort of fat suits on, then you could do that all day, because that would be an inflatable
supported by the air.
Exactly. And which takes us to the dinosaurs, which if you're inflated to a particular way and then all of a sudden the carbon dioxide changes because a meteor hits the Earth, then you've got a problem, because you either, if there's more carbon dioxide in the air, it's problematic for your breathing.
That's another book that you're planning on.
Exactly.
This is fascinating. Body tension, but you were talking about air being distributed within the body also. Outside of the lungs, which is a bit controversial.
It's more the tension is that the
tension. Okay.
Yes, because
the heat, the body heat that is generated by the compression of the air in the lungs is distributed by way of the blood. I surmise.
Exactly. Yeah. And just this part of this tensional integrity system within the within the human body. Part of that is the respiratory system, which pushes out this part. But to take it further, to go towards a more fringe versus mainstream view, if you asked someone who had just finished their medical exams, okay, tell us which muscles are important in the respiratory system, they'd say, okay, well, there's these intercostal muscles and the diaphragm, the ones around the ribs and the diaphragm, and maybe the ones in your neck if you're really struggling for breath. But if someone's sort of using those actively, you think, oh, there's a problem there. So let's say the diaphragm and the muscles around your rib cage.
Yeah.
And I'd say, okay, well, are the muscles in your hand, are they important? No, of course they're not important with your breathing. But riddle me this one, if I take an in-breath and breathe in and out, as usually like, if I clench my fist and try and take an in-breath, that's getting that. What's going on there? How does something here? How could that be important? The muscles in your hand.
You need to breathe in heavily, deeply when you have an open hand. That's true.
Yeah, it's like the old song, the knee bone's connected to the leg bone. Yeah. Things. This is connected. These muscles in the hand are connected all the way through down here. So if this is tight, you can't really breathe very well. And if your feet, similarly, if you scrunch up your feet and then try and take a deep in breath, you can't do it. So it's all connected. People do exercise, people do yoga, people do Tai Chi. It keeps these things pliable and working together so that so even though the air is in the chest, there's tension that connects those two. So there's the air is restricted to within the bounds of the sort of conventionally understood respiratory system, but the tension goes throughout.
Yeah. And this internal tension thing is also not something that is talked about in the textbook.
No, and another example of it is in a football, what in Australia might be called a soccer ball. There's air pushing out in that direction, and then the skin of the ball is pulling in. So you've got a push in one direction and a pull in the other direction.
Yeah.
And that distributes the forces so that if you kick the ball, bang, it's distributed over the whole of the ball and it can go for 100 meters. By contrast, if you deflate the ball, so it's just an empty soccer ball, if you kick that around for any length of time, it breaks. But if you put air in it, so it's all distributed nicely, bang, you could kick it for weeks and weeks. And that's that the forces are distributed evenly over this tensional integrity system because it's got a high degree of tensional integrity. Whereas if you let all the air out, that thing doesn't work properly.
Fascinating. Good example. So how can the body keep its temperature as stable as it does at around 36.9 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, a very good question.
We breathe differently in different. Well, anyway, just answer.
Yeah, good question. One of the studies which I referred to in the book was looking at these monks who were practicing something called tummo or tummo, and that study divided up this special breathing that they were doing and found that there are two elements of it. One was purely the physical, forceful breathing. They knew that something to do with the forceful breathing can increase the temperature. But then there was also the mental element of it, where the monks who were doing this tummo didn't just do the forceful breathing, they also had certain imagery associated with it. When a group of test people were trained up, they could use the forceful breathing straight away to increase their body temperature, but it only stayed within a certain band. So if they were sort of towards the lower end of the normal range, they could push it up to the top, but they would stick at a point. and they wouldn't go above that. Whereas the monks could increase their body temperature higher than that. And the understanding was that the forceful breathing can get you to a certain point, but your body has an innate thermostat or something which just sort of says, okay, we're hot enough now, so we're not going to go above that. But if you do certain visualization of flames and things like that, and that's sort of that's not describing it very well, that you can push past these limits. But unless you're doing the special visualization, the forceful breathing can get you to a certain point and you stay there, and that the body's sort of thermostat will not let you get past that point.
Do you think that 36.9 degrees is the optimal temperature, or should it actually be a little bit higher, perhaps, if we were better at breathing correctly?
Yeah, it's a good question. To answer that question, I would like to go back in time to see the normal body temperature when modern anatomical.
Yeah, 300,000 years ago. What was the temperature
exactly.
in the bodies at that time?
Exactly. But I don't want to be insist some sort of cruel authoritarian regime where we don't have any heating in our houses. We're all doing ice baths every morning. We're all having to shun any outside source of heat and generate ourselves. Warm bath is great, isn't it? Sauna is lovely. But being able to have that flexibility to deal with the cold and to understand what's important about being flexible, concentrating on our breathing, that can't hurt, I think.
No, it would be very useful, to say the least. Of course, it would. But sometimes we involuntarily have a higher body temperature when we have a fever. So what's the deal with that?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure if it's the body saying, well, I can go a step higher and it's going to be too high for the virus or something like that to sort of burn it out, or whether it's the virus is making me breathe differently, and so the virus is making me breathe differently, and therefore that's why the temperature is going high.
Because that's what I was thinking. I mean, maybe we breathe differently when we're sick, when we have a fever. I mean, that hasn't been measured enough, I assume, and there's studied. I mean, studied. Yes. Have they studied this? The breathing in people who are sick?
I'm not across that research, and then it would be the question of: is it cause or effect? Is the body
is it cause or effect
causing that to try and snuff out the virus, or is it the virus causing that, and then our body has to sort of try and get over that, and then the temperature will come down?
Also, when you exercise, you get hot. Is that not because the muscles are warmed up? Or you mentioned before that there is a certain effect from activity in muscles also.
Yes, and the just purely there's energy being changed from stored energy to energy of motion, and some of that will go off. It will be dissipated as heat. But when you're running, you have additional airflow through the lungs, more squeezing, and so that's maybe you're perhaps you're driving more air through the lungs to get more oxygen, and as a sort of side effect, getting more squeezing, and so a key part of athletic performance is trying to manage that and try and not overheat.
Yeah. There's also another interesting theory in your book that has to do with smoking. You have a theory about why smoking is so addictive.
You're making me sound crazy.
I'm sorry to say that as a Swede, I might have a
different view on that.
A different view, which may debunk that theory, but I'm not sure because you say in the book that nicotine is addictive, of course, but your theory is that it is probably mainly because people are breathing in warm air that it is so addictive, because the body feels in a way that it makes it easier to heat the body. It's already warm. The air is already warm when it comes in, and that's why it's so addictive. Is that? Do I explain it correctly, or is?
No, you've explained it really well, and that bare bones, the body's saying, whatever I'm doing here is achieving one of my main goals, which is generating warmth. Yeah. So I want to do that more. And if I'm stressed or something like that and not breathing quite as well, I want more of that. What do? I go back to this.
Smoke warm air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, well, nicotine is, your theory is that nicotine is, yes, it is addictive, but not as addictive as the body wanting warm air. But here in Sweden, it's very common to use wet snuff, which is called snus in Sweden.
Yes,
and it's got a lot of nicotine in it, and it's very well documented. I know not from personal experience, but from the experience of many of my friends and close people I have close to me, that it is very, very difficult to quit using wet snuff. And it's more many have witnessed that testify that it's more difficult to quit using wet snuff than to quit smoking, because a lot of people in Sweden have quit smoking, and then they have gone over to this wet snuff thing, and it's been much more difficult for them to quit that. And that has nothing to do with the breathing. It's just the nicotine. You put it under your lip, and you get the nicotine. So that's
that's a excellent point. And there are nicotine receptors in the brain, and there was a line in the research which was saying, yes, there's a bit of a buzz from nicotine, but the test animals rarely went back for more. So they'd go, oh yeah, okay, but the test animals would be subjected to it, but they wouldn't go back for more. But potentially, if your brain has developed the association between nicotine and effortlessly getting some sort of free warm air.
I mean, it's a Pavlovian effect there.
Yes, and but yes, that's gone through my mind, and I completely appreciate that. That's a sort of question.
Well, you should look into that, actually, because I'm not sure if it might be the case that it is people who have been smoking first and then gone over to wet snuff that have this big problem quitting the snuff. I'm not sure, rather than people that have never
just
smoked and just started with this thing. So
I'll have to get see if the Scanlan Institute will fund that,
that
research.
Perhaps.
Yes, a lot of question marks, and wouldn't it be great because smoking, I think a lot of people start, and it might be cool when you're young. Not that I'm saying that it's cool, just to reiterate that. But people get started and then they have trouble stopping, and it's very difficult to stop. And the number of deaths each year that are attributed to sort of some sort of effect of smoking is a large number. So ideally, we'd understand more about that.
That's a very good thing to look into, what the reasons are. So there's another thing here that you mentioned. We eat food to get energy, and apparently it's well established, as far as I understand from your book here, that about 90% of the energy that we take in, that we eat, goes to heating the body. Mainstream says that it goes to chemical processes in the cells, and you say it goes to fuel the muscles around the respiratory organs, right?
Yeah, the muscles and everything to maintain that tension.
To maintain that tension, but it's about 90%, right?
90% of the food that a mammal eats supposedly goes towards heat production. Yes.
So is that figure this high because we're doing such a bad job at it, and that we would need much less food if we breathed better?
Would need less food if we breathed better, if we had better alignment, but it's not as if it's going to come down by a huge amount, because not to 10%,
from 90 to 10, but from 90 to 80 maybe, or
it might. The thing is, it's metabolically, it's sort of, I don't want to use that word, but it's quite a costly thing to keep warming up 7.5 liters of air a minute. So we need a lot of energy to do that, and all our other bodily systems are sort of keyed into it. They're lined up with 36.9. So we're hooked up to this sort of high output system. So we need a lot of food energy to generate that, but we could generate it better if our alignment was better. So people who do the sort of slow restorative yoga or Tai Chi, you'd think, how's that going to affect your body composition? After having done that, your body demands less food. It says, we're not quite as hungry. And my interpretation of that is, well, if you work on your posture and your alignment, you don't need as much fuel to generate the same body level of body heat. I'm also interested in the structural role of body fat as well. If to give you an analogy, imagine you're walking down the stairs. You're a bit, you're not as stable as you could be, but you're fine. If you wrapped yourself in a duvet which could be called a doona in Australia or a big blanket, all of a sudden you're a bit more stable. So if everything is a bit out of kilter, if you're not in good alignment and your body puts on a bit of fat, and your body says, oh, okay, well, that works. We'll keep doing that.
Yeah.
But if you have a strong back and good alignment, the body says, well, look, I ate as much food as the guy sitting next to me, but my body's not going to be laying it down as fat.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Well, that's kind of interesting.
But I also
then you can see in children who are
breathing through the mouth and so on.
Yeah.
Yes. But then it could feed back on itself in terms of then you can't breathe as well because the layer of the fat might be getting in the way of sort of the optimal movement. But but you and I realize that we're having this open-minded conversation. And we're engaging with the fringe here, my fringe, and it's interesting to consider these aspects rather than there's you eat, your body turns it into fat. So someone who's fat has either eaten more or hasn't done as much exercise.
But it's not that simple.
It's not that simple. But there are advocates. That's right. There are advocates who are saying, no, it's not about the food. And then there are other people who are saying, no, it's not about the exercise. I'm saying that there is a structural role of fat, which no one else is saying. But
but I think you're onto something. Please keep studying that.
See what I can do.
What you find. So,
well, Paul, I can see that you don't have a personal interest, which is fantastic. But
not yet. might have later. We'll see. So, how does mainstream science and medicine react to your findings, if they do in some way, in any way? I know that you told me beforehand that you have recently presented a paper at the International Conference of Systems Biology and Bioengineering. So, what has the reaction been to that?
I had a very polite response, but this was amongst engineers. Engineers engineers aren't bound by, what did the engineer say in 1826? Or what did the engineer say in 1921? They go, what works? When engineers want to create warm air, they don't use chemistry, they use physics. They squeeze and if engineers could generate warm air using chemistry, they'd do it.
Sure.
But instead, we use air conditioning, which involves adiabatic heating and cooling. And so from an engineer's perspective, that's fine. It makes a bit of sense. And as we'd mentioned earlier, maybe there's a bit of both. Maybe there's some of the chemistry gives off a bit of heat. Maybe if you're a baby, you've got a lot of brown adipose tissue, much more than adults. So as a baby, if you don't have your muscles and bones fully matured, so you can't squeeze the air, and I haven't seen a baby with good posture yet. I don't mean to posture shame babies, but they have some chemistry which can give off heat, and the parents do their best to keep them warm as well. But engineers are open-minded and they do what works. Did you say that you're a positive sort of person? The glass is half full. Engineers don't say the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. They just say the glass is twice as large as it needs to be. They don't sort of bring that emotional baggage. So I had a positive, polite response from World Congress on Engineers. I won't say by contrast, but I will say by contrast, when I presented a paper about vision and the impact of the respiratory system and pressure on the inside, I presented a paper in Singapore at the International Myopia Conference there. The people didn't really want to engage with it because it's their bread and butter is selling glasses. Yeah. They're trying to do the right thing, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, you might say. And there's a big industry there in selling glasses, and You can live a long and happy life with glasses, and that's great. But I just have a different.
Not
aspect.
only put on their glasses, they put on their blinkers as well, big ones.
Yes, but again, it's one of the challenging things about being in the visual care industry would be you've worked hard at school, then you go to university, and you probably come out with a huge with some sort of student debt, and you get taken on, and there's no point where you can really put your hand up and say, "Oh, hang on, isn't all this close-up work? Isn't this sort of making the problem worse?" Next thing you know, maybe you've got your own practice, and your own practice, you have to sell these things, and you might be part of a franchise, and the franchise or would be saying, "Oh, you've got 7 minutes to see each client," and you don't have a long-form podcast to pick up things like this and say, "Oh, well, look, your eyes are like this," and talk.
Yeah, it's understandable. Things. It's understandable.
Yeah, how I would express it would be the incentive landscape is not something that sort of lends itself to, "Oh, let's go back to basics and reevaluate this question."
No, it doesn't. No.
Maybe in the third.
Yeah. What would the practical consequences, the implications be for science and for society at large if we get if we have this new understanding of body heat generation? What would it be?
It could save a lot of people. There are different levels. For example, at a practical level, tens of thousands of people just in the UK alone, the excess winter deaths, sort of tens of thousands higher than in summer. So some people's lives will be saved if there's more emphasis on, hey, let's work on our posture a bit. There's also, say, cost savings or less fossil fuel use if we less energy used if we are able to not heat our homes as much. But as I say, I don't want to stop people from heating their homes or having cups of tea and coffee. We've put a question mark over something to do with cigarette smoking. There may be less people take up the sport of cigarette smoking, or more people are able to give it up if they could understand more, if there is some input there. And on the wider question of, say, what's the impact for science, the great thing, one of the funny things about science is if you read the sort of hardcore skeptic scientists, they say, no, we're open to everything, but they'll fight it to the death to sort of stop new ideas coming in. But then when they have to accept them, then it's like, oh, that's the way the system's designed to work. So it could be quite neatly incorporated into science, and you could draw a line under it and say, oh, there was a period when we thought the body heat was mainly from chemistry. We've recognized it's maybe from physics. And then if you ask the question, well, how did that come about? Oh, well, we sort of took into account a lot of observations. And
no, there was this British Australian guy called Paul many years ago, and he wrote this book that,
Paul Bolling, was it? Is that
Paul
right?
Bolling? Was something like that, yeah.
And the and how did he? Oh, and there were some murmurs about it in some of the ancient sort of texts, and then people may say, oh, well, is there any other sort of ancient, say, spiritual texts, any other lessons from those things that we might have overlooked or written off because, hey, we've got the Enlightenment from the 1700s and we're doing all this crazy stuff to do with chemistry and we've made huge technological gains and that's fantastic. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't ignore all this wisdom. People weren't quite so dopey as you might assume in the times before science. When you look at things like the pyramids, for example, people in the past were obviously quite clever. And they had a lot of time to sit around thinking about posture and breathing. They didn't have sort of Netflix and things like that.
No.
To spend
and the posture isn't the best when you're looking at Netflix. Films, that's for sure. So what is the problem?
Not that I'm anti-Netflix, in case you're thinking about a Netflix documentary or anything, but yes.
Yeah. What's the problem with mainstream science, would you say? I mean, what because textbooks and professionals, they seem to have all the answers when they in fact don't.
Yes.
There is something, I mean, proud about it, or stubborn about it, or what is the basic problem, do you think, here, that it's not that open?
What I'd like to say is that getting back to that, say, incentive landscape, it's sort of who's going to be funded to do these sort of, let's undermine our own industry. And there are a lot of things where mainstream science is fantastic, spot on. There's no sort of distorting factors. Great. But it's difficult to sort of convince someone of something when their wage depends on them not understanding and not putting it forward. I know some people are quite. There's this peer review process, for example, and initially when I published sought to publish papers about the eyes, for example, and again with Body Heat. Now I've had the Body Heat published in a peer review journal. I'm happy with that. That's great. But when you get knockbacks from significant journals that say, yeah, this can't go in our main journal, and you've said maybe it could go in one of your sort of sister journals. No, we're not even going to pass that on. Try somewhere else. Thanks, but no. Having said that, it's tough if you're a mainstream scientist, and you've got someone who looks like they live under a bridge suggesting, oh, maybe something a bit different is correct. You might have a lot of those queries in a day, and it's hard to sort the wheat from the chaff. So I'm trying to be charitable there, and they're all people of wanting to do their best. And if you're really hard sort of mainstream Western medicine, you think everyone who's proposing something different is a threat and could somehow be costing lives and having some negative impact. So that's what fuels you to try and stop those people even being heard, which I think which cuts across this sort of free speech. Paul speaks to Anders. If Paul's speaking rubbish, great. It will come out in the wash.
Yeah,
people will work that out.
People will have great fun listening to it anyway. So
yes,
they can laugh their heads off anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the art of victory is the art of persistence, somebody said. So just keep doing what you're doing. I think at some point
I'll persist, and I accept that some people will not embrace it, and that they'll want to express that, and I get that. So if I've offended anyone, my apologies, and but we're just having a discussion.
Mainstream scientists.
Yes, it's just air coming out of my mouth, and I don't mean to.
Well, it has to do with air and air pressure anyway. So
yeah, certainly.
So we've talked for a long time, and it's been fantastic. We'll soon wrap this up, I think, but we have a few more subjects or topics here to handle. Talking about early on, you spoke about this vision thing, that you were interested in vision and how it works, and how you were trying to improve your own vision because you were myopic when you were younger, and you managed to eliminate your dependence on glasses, as you said, through a process of experimentation. And we didn't really get to the end of that. I think. So what happened? What was the outcome, and what are you going to do with that knowledge now?
Right. To answer that last bit first, that knowledge now, I'm putting it into a book that I'm sure Amazon that'll also race up the charts on Amazon, which would be fantastic. But in a nutshell, you have the length of your eyeball is important for accuracy, for good vision at near or far distances. You have this squashy ball in the wall of your body, and what I came to understand was there's pressure from the respiratory system and from the inside, which affects how long or short that eyeball is. And so by better understanding that, and by working on the posture and breathing, you can have that eyeball being in the right range, being able to shorten or lengthen, because you're breathing properly and your alignment's good.
Yeah.
When you're, I could give you some examples of mentioned about why I'm saying that the breathing and the vision are connected, and this is something I drew attention to I drew the optical industry's attention to back at the International Myopia Conference back in 2006, although they don't seem to have run with the ball just yet. But the first example, I'm saying that posture and breathing and vision are closely connected, whereas mainstream optometry does not talk about breathing, apart from the fact that, yes, the eyeballs need oxygen. To give you the simple example, if you look at something, if you breathe in and out and feel with your mouth closed, and you feel how easy or difficult that is, easy. If you look at something in the distance and try and take a deep in breath and feel how easy or difficult that is, and then if you look at something up as close as you can to your eyes, like the ridges on your fingerprints, on your fingers, and you try and take a deep in breath doing that, and then I ask, is it easier to take a deep in breath when you're looking in the distance or when you're looking at something right up close?
Rhetorical question.
Rhetorical question, because for me, and I think for the majority of people, they'll find that if they're trying to look at something up close, they can't take a deep in breath.
It's like when you clench your fist, as you said before, your hand.
Yes. And there's a reason for that, as opposed to just some faulty wiring in the brain that's sending out the messages. To see well in the distance, a short eyeball is good. To see well up close, a long eyeball is good. So when your body says, I want to look at something, when you're saying, I want to look at something up close, your body stops you from breathing in a lot, stops you so that the eyeball can bulge back and be long.
Oh, yeah.
But to see well in the distance, you want a short eyeball. So the body says, by all means, take a deep in breath, push that eyeball short.
Yeah. Basic physics.
Yeah. And then another simple example where this is near and this is far, and I've got them lined up. So all I'm doing is changing, looking near, far, near, far, near, far. And so all I'm doing is changing whether I'm looking near or far. If I hum, that's output of my respiratory system. If I hum at the same time as looking near, far, I hear the sound of my humming go up or down, which is telling, depending on whether I'm looking near or far, which is telling me that there's a change in pressure, depending on whether my body's saying, oh, I'm looking at something in the distance now. Oh, I'm looking at something up close now. So there's that change. And then the third simple example is, what do you do when you sneeze? If there wasn't pressure from the respiratory system pushing against the back of your eyeball, then when you have that high pressure event, the sneeze, you wouldn't need to brace the front of your eyeball to keep them sort of inside you.
So they don't pop out.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a connection between the posture and the breathing. And personally, I wore glasses. For 10 years, I was at -3, -3.25. 2008, under the controlled conditions of the Australian sort of road traffic, the driver's license people, I was able to pass the eye test, see well enough to drive, which is 20/40, without any glasses, and I did the same again in 2013. So
your vision is normal, back to normal now.
I fell off the horse a little bit for about 6 or 12 months where I didn't do much yoga, and I was just so my vision's gone down a little bit again, but I'm probably still 20/40. But you're okay. I don't have a car to drive at the moment, so I'm not borderline, and I'm on the road.
No.
Going.
Still, it's fascinating that you've been able to improve it that much. I mean, it's really fantastic.
And the problem being that being an anecdote, and you'll read about people on the internet. Yes, I've improved my eyes. I've improved this, but no one's going to fund a study that would do everyone out of business, because that's the bread and butter of optometry.
Yeah, the glass industry and the contact lens industry, that's big business, of course.
And they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to do what they've been taught.
Of course. Yeah, well, everybody tries to do the right thing, but there's so much money involved. It's
Yeah.
creates problems.
If you can have a competition of ideas and sort of open dialogue and free speech, then
I think so too. So this is one thing. Then looking into the future here, the vision thing, but your next missions are also, I understand, to explain not just how vision works, but also how cancer works and how what consciousness is. Tell us more about that.
Let's go for just go for consciousness. The point I'm getting across, and that has sort of occupied me for quite a long time, is the importance of tension, push in one direction and a pull in the other direction. And when you've got that tension and a push this way and that way, that's when you have life. That's when you have brain, thought, consciousness. And there's a push and a pull everywhere. There's a push and a pull between the Earth and the Moon. But apparently we're not supposed to be able to feel that, even though the oceans do, and all the water. So we're supposed to be not quite able to feel that. But there's a push and a pull between the Earth and the Moon, the Earth and the Sun, the planets, everything. We're spinning around, and it goes from that sort of huge scale down to a tiny scale as well. But with consciousness, we are, and tension. The easiest thing that I could leave you with, the best example that I know of is if you. There's a thought that it's just in the brain. Consciousness is just in the brain, and that's it. Nothing else is relevant. And then when the brain gets smashed, bang, you're gone. That's the end of everything. But if you imagine that if you think of it, say, a double bass stringed instrument, that's got tension throughout it because the wooden part, the strings, they all go through, and the strings at the top spiral around those sort of keys which you change the tension with. But for me, my understanding of how the body works is that the body is like that, and you've got this like a tension going up into the spiral of the brain here.
Yeah.
So we know with the stringed instrument that it's not all just that tight coil there, which is important, but the whole lot of it is. It's the whole thing. It's not the brain by itself. It's the whole thing. It's all tensioned throughout. And where does that tension come from? Tension comes from your posture and your breathing and attention to that. So the yogis, the people who are thinking about consciousness, they say, let's do some meditation. Let's think about sort of sitting in a nice sort of straight alignment and working on our breathing, and thinking, and so so for me, tension and consciousness are very tightly connected. As soon as you start cutting that, so for example, if you start drinking alcohol, your breathing goes out the window, and you wake up the next morning and you go, oh, I can't remember what happened, because you don't have that tension anymore. There'll be sort of different chemical explanations. Oh, why did that happen? But really, when you cut the tension, then the tension in the brain, the consciousness goes. So if as soon as you don't have tension in the body, then like at night, for example, a different state of consciousness, your breathing just sort of changes. You have a different.
Yeah, completely. And then you dream and you're in other realms.
Yes. And one thing about dreaming and other realms is there is a role where I think where dreaming has a particular function to play, where just say tension in the body is important, just say tension and it goes up into the brain, then at night when you power down, getting that sort of alignment back and processing things is important. So you have dreams, and at that dream point, your muscles are the muscles that would make you run out of the room. Normally, they're switched off, so you've only got you can't do anything for it. But you do have your breathing is still going. So if your body, Anders, says, okay, we need to tension up this bit, or we need to sort of straighten this out to sort of be ready for tomorrow, how are we going to get Anders to do that? Well, we'll come up with some scenario. Anders doesn't like exams. His dream is going to be he's back at school. He's just found out he's got an exam in 15 minutes. His breathing goes nuts. And like that's a way of getting Anders' breathing to tension and posture and pull things in the right way. Mm-hmm. And your body has done that for a particular reason. It's not just, Anders had a terrible teacher and it just sort of keeps coming back to him. It's, oh no, if we tap into this thought about exams or whatever winds you up, it will get that emotion and that breathing going. Your arms aren't going to move. You're not going to, but it will do what your body needs to do for and so your breathing will be quite strange.
Very, very interesting. Is a new take on the meaning of dreams and sleeping and all that.
And it's not to say that there aren't other things to do
because
as well.
I'm fascinated by these topics, and I talk to a lot of people who have many, spiritually inclined explanations to what is happening and all that. And many people talk about. It was interesting when you spoke about these instruments with the chords and the keys on top and all that, because it's many people in this context say that it's about resonance. It's all about
tension
resonance.
Tension
and resonance are very related things.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so for by the way, when you're dreaming, do you know what happens to your eyes?
No, yeah, well, you have the REM, the rapid eye movement.
So if your breathing's going nuts and your eyes are going nuts, that's again pressure in the back of the eyeballs, and sort of that connection between your breathing is going crazy and your eyes are sort of doing the same sort of thing. But with the point about the tension, there's a chap called Tesla who is quite an interesting guy.
Mentioned him in the last episode. Yeah,
he said that the important things are one of the sort of three important things was frequency. He said, frequency, understanding frequency, which goes to, and you're saying some people you've been speaking to who thought a lot about these things and have a lot of understanding. They talk about vibration and that tension. If if it is just tension, if we're not just a column of things, we're actually this more like this.
High strung.
Then tension can be if you put two of these things together, then the tension will sort of be shared by them, and it can be affected by the outside. But anyway, I was going to make a different point, which is
okay. You lost the train. Anyway, never mind. There's so much to say about these things.
Maybe it was Tesla. It was Tesla. Tesla said frequency.
Yeah,
and the flip side of that is tension, because if you've got a rope and it's tight, the tension will be if the tension is different, then the frequency will be different. So a flip side of the coin of Tesla saying, frequency is important, the tension that you're holding yourself at, which is posture, breathing, doing the right thing, thinking, and the alignment, that is changing your own tension, which is changing your own frequency in the same way that having a loose thing has a different frequency to having something that's tight.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Fascinating.
Yeah.
New insights and new views on things, but it all ties together actually. So can you explain the causes of cancer in 2 minutes? You think or 3?
I can, but I'll get
or maybe 4.
Well, we could blow it out to another podcast.
We could.
People coming back. Yeah, because
does it also have to do with tension and breathing?
Yeah, in a nutshell. Sorry. Yes, that's a spoiler alert, but But
Spoiler
yes,
alert. But it has, there's a golden thread all through the.
Yes, an attention thread, attentioned golden thread. Let's coin that. Thread. Yes.
Okay, so maybe we shouldn't dive too deeply into that. Can you say anything about it? No,
in that, if you that that everyone's trying to do the right thing. Let's put it that way. But if you look into, say the causes of, I'm really struggling with this because this is the body heat with the credibility builder. The eyes stuff, okay, there's a huge industry that doesn't necessarily want to embrace it, but I've got to put it out there. Cancer is what's going to set the world on fire and have me public enemy number one. But you've got to take that responsibility. And if I'm wrong, great, shut me down. There's a lot of people who've suggested a lot of things about cancer, but with cancer though, for example, a relative of mine flew over from Australia, and the first thing I said, because he had cancer, I said the first thing I said, well, look, I'm writing a book about cancer, and he said, great, but I don't think you can know anything more than the best cancer specialists in Melbourne can tell me. So thanks, but no. Mm. And another relative, when I was talking to about eyes, he asked me, do I believe in something that was obviously crazy, but he was saying, and I thought, it's small. So there will be a lot of resistance, and it's walking into a hail of gunfire. But courage is contagious, hopefully, and it's one of those things I've got to get out of my head.
Yeah.
Onto the page, again, it's a paradigm shift, like with the
well, we can do another podcast about the cancer thing when you feel more comfortable about that, and when this book, The Body Heat Fiasco, has hit the ceiling.
When it gets to the 7 million mark,
the 7 million mark, then we can So in about a month or two or so.
Yes. 3 or 4 weeks.
So if I understand it correctly, you're planning to write a series of books where this is the first one, and there is a golden tension thread.
Yes.
all through them, and the next one is going to be about vision. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
And then you have the consciousness thing and the cancer thing, and they will all.
Yeah, I think consciousness lends itself to sort of being very woolly and not getting anywhere. So I think I'll have to probably write about cancer first.
Do you write essays or things like that? I mean,
good question.
Where can people find out more about your work if they want to know more after having listened to this fascinating podcast episode?
Yeah, good question. I've set up a Twitter account. In the back of the book, there is some. I've directed readers towards websites that aren't. They don't have a sufficient amount of content at the moment. Zero content. So I am not readily. It's not easy to find things that I've written or read, but that is a work in progress. That's what I need to do. And I hope
you have a website or something. I mean, you don't have to be very active on it, but as long as you have one, you can get in touch with people, and people can get in touch with you that way.
Yeah, exactly. For example, I'm not a regular visitor to Twitter, but I did suggest that if people would like to follow the action, they could go to @Paul J Scanlan on Twitter, @Paul J Scanlan. I'll make some occasional announcements. But
and then of course they can always go to Amazon or wherever they want to buy their books. They usually buy their books and find this, The Body Heat Fiasco.
Yeah, and I've so appreciated speaking with you today about this, and I've let myself down there on the websites and so on. But it's great having an open-minded discussion.
It's my pleasure. Paul, thank you so much for being here, and good luck fixing science and changing paradigms.
Good on you, Anders. Thank you very much for everything that you do. I really appreciate it.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. And you can follow Mind the Shift on Facebook and Instagram. And you can follow me, Anders Bolling, on all the main social media and also on medium.com. Thank you.